We are obsessed with the clock. Time moves too slowly or too quickly. We're constantly asking, what time is it? But we're asking the wrong question. In the realm of the soul, time isn't a flat line or a repetitive circle. It's a spiral. It's the architect of everything you are meant to become. If you feel like you're running out of time or like you're stuck in a circle of the same old mistakes or the same old story, stay with us. Today, we're shifting our center of gravity. We're going to stop asking, what time is it? And start asking, what is it time for? Because your evolution only happens here in the physical, and the invitation to wake up is happening right now. Welcome to Becoming You, the Path to Consciousness, where we apply spiritual wisdom and truth to your everyday life. I'm Terry Hasty.
And I'm Haydn Hasty, and our mission is very simple: individual transformation through spiritual realization. We don't dissect current events or debate personalities. There's enough of that going on. But instead, we're here to offer you a lens to see yourself and the world with a power and an intentionality that you may not realize that you possess.
We're currently in a 3-part series called The Gravity of the Soul. And in part 1, which was last week, Bridging the Gap, we explored the 3 traditional approaches to human development. It's the paths most of us take to navigate the confusion we experience or any dysfunction, and certainly our suffering.
Well, today we move into part 2 of this 3-part series. And part 2, this episode, is called Stop Asking What Time Is It? We're sharing 6 out of 12 spiritual principles that can fundamentally shift your center of gravity and your understanding of who you are. If this is your first time joining us, we're so grateful you're here. And to our frequent flyers, it's wonderful to have you back.
As always, if these ideas kind of spark a question or a shift in your perspective, please reach out. We love hearing how things are landing with you, and we'd love to answer any questions that you have. So let's dive in. You want to start us off, Hayden?
Yep, love to. So I'm going to state the obvious. The world as we know it is no more. While our old systems have helped us survive for decades, they've reached their expiration date.
Hmm.
We see this very clearly in the government, a system that is saturated with greed and systemic corruption and just a total vacuum of genuine integrity and support of people. Whether it's the 23 members of Congress and one senator with nothing beyond a high school diploma or the highly educated elite, we see that credentials are no longer a guarantee or substance of character or capability. If we think that a change in a party, in a political party in the midterms, and that is going to be the cure, then we are naive and we're missing the point. This brokenness that has taken place, this collapse, is a signal. It's a wake-up call to stop looking at things the old way, and the same old way is disappearing. The most important question that has to be asked is, how are we going to solve these problems, this division, this constant worrying, the fact that 35.9, 36 million Americans live in poverty, which is close to 11% of the population. The U.S. is the richest country in the world, but many people can't weather a $500 setback,
Yeah.
while the richest individuals and the largest corporations pay very little in taxes. Tesla, for example, paid no taxes at all in 2024, while Elon Musk is on his way to being the world's first trillionaire. If poverty is systemic, and we know it is, then we have to accept the fact that greed and corruption are systemic too. They're
Mhm.
two sides of the same coin, or you could say two dynamics of the same movement. But here's the hard truth about this: we can spend the rest of our lives analyzing these problems out there
Mhm.
and never find the answers that are going to bring about
But we can
change.
make ourselves crazier.
Absolutely, every day. Blame is a dead end. The real question isn't how the system broke, but how are we going to show up differently when it's time? How do we stop feeding the old structures and start embodying the world as we know it is possible to be? I want to share this quote. I love this quote from Sri Aurobindo from his masterpiece, Savitri. It's just four simple lines, and it says, "A few shall see what none yet understands. God shall grow up while the wise men talk
Mhm.
and sleep. For man shall not know the coming till its hour, and belief shall not be until the work is done."
I love that quote. Of course, you and I can read Sri Aurobindo and the Mother to each other and have tears in our eyes, but I wanna make sure that our listeners really understand it instead of just hearing kind of the beauty and the rhythm of it. So I'd really just like to take a minute to bring the quote into this conversation by adding here that while the world stays caught in the sleep, as Sri Aurobindo says, of intellectual debate and division and finger pointing, blame, there's a deeper transformation is quietly taking root within those who are willing to wake up. And hopefully, some of you listening are among those. This quote reminds us that the new world won't be built through talking or sensationalism or even kind of the traditional teachings and wisdom. And as we talked about last week, religion and therapy, but through the quiet inner work of consciousness that most people discount or dismiss and will certainly only believe is possible or even recognize that inner consciousness after the foundation is already laid by those who are willing to step out and to go ahead and do this work.
Well, the quote reveals one way that the evolutionary process is going to take place, which is it's going to take place whether you're aware of it or not.
Hmm.
But this evolutionary progress that is on its way, that you can begin to see signs of even here in 2026, in spite of the overwhelming suffering and despair.
All over the world.
That's one way that we can learn it, which is we sit back and let it take place. But that's going to involve even more suffering, and it's going to take so much more time. Unless there's a radical shift in consciousness, I'm suggesting that the process cannot change. And that's what this episode and the third episode, the next one, are about, which are about introducing spiritual concepts and principles related to consciousness that are aimed at the individual, not the Republicans, not the
Hmm.
Democrats, not the nation, but you, the individual. So before we can make this radical shift in consciousness, I guess it'd be a good idea to know what consciousness is.
So I think there are a lot of definitions for it. So certainly sharing where we're coming from would be
Sure.
helpful.
And we have our understanding of it as well. But we've got to get this understanding and this work down to the individual level. And with this in mind, let's look at a definition of consciousness. Consciousness is the truth of who you are that is working its way out through your ignorance.
So you could be a little kinder.
Could be a little harsher, that is working its way out through your stupidity. And we have all experienced that.
Or through our not knowing,
Well,
through just not having the background or the, teachers or the knowledge having been shared with us.
yes, or not having chosen it or not having asked about it. You have to take responsibility for where you are. So, with this in mind, as it's really not difficult to see or understand, your everyday life and circumstances are really simply the unfolding of who you think you are.
Mhm.
And who you think you are is dependent upon your level of consciousness. It's really not hard to understand. So, that's a really good, simple, but powerful definition of consciousness. It's the truth of who you are. It's working its way out through your stumblings, your unawarenesses, your ignorance, and your suffering.
And, our our development in that area, whether it's consciousness or you call your spiritual development, it's the only kind of real leverage that you have in changing the world where it feels like so much is out of our control. Like, how can I affect that? How can I handle all this chaos and division going on all over the world? But you can focus on your own growth. And in that way, we're not ignoring the world, but you're bringing the world what it needs and what it lacks, which is purpose, clarity, and a conscious path. What we have to understand is that this shift in consciousness for us as the individual, it's not a mass movement, it's a subjective one. It's all about you. And now I've gone to all 3 of the No Kings events, and I can tell you there's a great deal of individuality expressed there. The truth doesn't express itself uniformly, it expresses itself uniquely through you. So you could think of yourself, for example, as a prism. And the one infinite light, whether you say the absolute, the divine God, it passes through you to create a color that only you can manifest. It's through your unique subjective experience that the infinite truth can be known on the planet and in your relationships and at work. So, developing your spirituality is the most important thing that you can do. And that's why we're going to share these guideposts with you. So, you ready, Hayden? Let's
Yes.
go into these 6 of the 12 principles that we're going to share with you. Number 1, I am a spiritual being in a physical world, but I have to develop my spirituality. 2, before I could evolve, something had to be involved in my birth. 3, nothing can evolve out of me that was not contained in me at the start. 4, the truth of who I am is contained in that involution. The hidden reality of the truth of my existence lies inside of me and evolves over time. 5, each moment, each thought, each setback, each joy reveals more and more the meaning of this truth to me. And number 6, these truths contain the negation of my past and the fulfillment of my destiny and purpose as a human being. So now let's take a closer look.
Yes. And so let's go back to number 1. I'm a spiritual being in a physical world, but I have to develop my spirituality. This first principle is really vital because it validates our spiritual nature, not through physical proof, but through the weight of our own subjective experiences. Between the thousands of reported near death experiences, mystical encounters, prophetic dreams, there's an overwhelming map of human experience proving that we are much more than our minds, our bodies, or our emotions. And even our innate hunger for beauty and justice and love points to something really grander and something more permanent. These aren't just feelings, they're really echoes that lie inside of us of a reality that draws the struggles of everyday life. And we have all experienced that.
And even the feeling that we can get at a sunrise or a sunset that just fills us from the inside. And sometimes things bring us to tears, like you said, that are so beautiful and bring and remind us of the joy of life.
But see, here's the challenge. The challenge is that you have to develop your spirituality. It's a little harder than it sounds because there are thousands of paths to choose from. I'm not going to make the mistake of trying to tell you which one you should choose, but I can tell you just very briefly about my own. And it was when I was first introduced to the work of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, I found this immediate freedom and joy that I'd been searching for my entire life. It was the answer for me. as I became a committed and dedicated student of that work.
I remember our daughter thought you were having a midlife crisis because you wouldn't come out and play, so to speak. You
I
just wanted
started
to read
withdrawing.
all the time.
Yeah,
I remember we went to the beach, and she said, "Is Dad ever coming out on the beach?" Because you just were, not consumed in a bad way, but you
I
were so,
was. I
in
would say I was consumed in my self-contained bliss of
right.
being in a
Yeah.
room by myself and realizing that, that I had found everything that I was looking for. But spirituality, it's so important to understand, is subjective. You have to find that answer that rings true for you.
The thing that makes you wanna, just be consumed by it in a very powerful way, whether that is we've talked about lots of different methodologies, but, whether it's something that you read or something that you physically do, but it's something that takes you closer and closer to the truth of who you are, and you want to do it, so we're not asking you to do something that's a struggle.
Well, it eventually will become a yoga, so to speak, for any individual. What I do know and what I have experienced that I think is true for all of us is that spiritual realization is synonymous with transformation. Now, if I say it backwards and it's still the same thing, transformation is the result of spiritual realization. It's realization that transcends the mind and the body and the emotional framework. It's the aha moment. It's the moment that you understand that you're not your brain, that you're not your mind, that this understanding, this realization is coming from somewhere else. And when you realize that you are a spiritual being playing in a physical world, the entire game that you're playing changes. And it really just simply begins with an aspiration, a burning desire to know why you're here and to live a life of purpose. When you begin to commit to that inquiry
I mean, why am I here? Yeah.
and what is the nature of my existence as a human being? When you begin to commit to that inquiry, your mind shifts. It stops being preoccupied with just surviving the insanity of the day to day, and it starts focusing on the real work of why you are here, which is developing the knowledge, wisdom, and truth of who you actually are. In fact, you could say, as I mentioned just a second ago, that the spiritual path is it's kind of a yoga of sorts. It's when you come to the point of your life, you development where you move away from just wandering around and just
Or
trying
running
to get
around.
through or running around. That's even better. You stop all that wasted time to directing it to a conscious and disciplined evolutionary path in your life.
It's kinda like when, Courtney said, "Is dad having a midlife crisis?" People want us all to be running around and doing the same thing and acting kinda crazy. There's a, separation almost that happens, but it's in such a good way, and then after people get accustomed to this other way that you're behaving of not taking the bait all the time, not running around like a chicken with your head cut off, people are gonna wanna know what you know.
Um, Correct. I would agree with that. But the goal in our work is not to pick that path for you. We can only share with you, what we have learned, but it is to help you orient your mind towards that truth that your life is more than just a cycle of being born, living, and suffering and dying. It's much more than that.
So, principle number 2, before I could evolve, something had to be involved in my birth. And this is such a profound shift in perspective. The story of your life, you see, it's not what you think it is. If something is evolving, and it's obvious that we are, everything on the planet is, it means there was something that first had to exist in order to evolve. Here's one way that, we can think about it, and I like this image a lot. I mean, you can think about it this way. Involution is the inhalation, and evolution is exhalation of the divine.
Of God.
Yeah. So, for example, before a flower can bloom, the entire blueprint of that flower is already involved or folded into the seed. And this is the architecture of the infinite within you. The physicist David Bohm, he described this as the implicate and the explicate order. The implicate is the involved, the hidden enfolded potential, like the flower within the seed. The explicate is the evolved, the physical unfolding reality that we see every day.
Well, the beautiful understanding of this makes you realize you're not missing anything. There, essentially, and I know this sounds ridiculous, but there's nothing wrong with you. Everything that you need to live an extraordinary life lies inside of you.
I remember growing up with this image that's like an assembly line before you head from the other, whether you call it heaven or not, to earth. And people would say, in that assembly line, I got skipped over when it came to brains, or I got skipped over, and that's just not true. Eh, One, a Bible verse that most people are familiar with, and it's very early in the Bible, Genesis 1, verse 27 says, "You're made in the image of God." And it's referring to this implicate order. It's the divine blueprint that was breathed into you before you even had a name. So what do you wanna do? Your life is no longer about just surviving, making ends meet, getting lots of likes on your, post. It's about uncovering that hidden reality, which is so magnificent and so beautiful. It's about letting the divine architecture within you finally kinda show in your physical form.
So let's expand that from, only what was involved can evolve. So just to highlight that principle number 3, nothing can evolve out of me that was not contained in me at the start.
This is really one of my favorite ones of all the 12, Hayden, and I think the perfect metaphor for this is the transformation of the butterfly. It's a really common one, but before you might not know this, before the caterpillar even hatches, it already contains the imaginal discs, the biological kind of blueprints for the wings, the legs, the heart of the butterfly. These were involved in the egg of the caterpillar, from the very start. But first, it must live as a caterpillar. And then here comes the really radical part. Inside the cocoon, the caterpillar doesn't just grow wings and then, burst out of the cocoon and it's a butterfly. It dissolves. The caterpillar becomes this kind of literal soup or goo of enzymes. In that state of total dissolution, being completely dissolved, the only things that survive that are the imaginal discs, the original discs from the egg. They're the only parts that remain because they're the only parts that are truly the butterfly. And from that original blueprint, the butterfly is formed, emerges from the cocoon, and then it takes flight. And the same is true for you. If all of that design went into a butterfly, wouldn't the same hold true for you? If those spiritual kind of imaginal discs weren't already involved in you, in your center, in your soul, you could never evolve into your true self. You'd just be creeping around on the ground like a caterpillar. So, this principle that nothing can evolve out of you that wasn't already contained within you is the definition of evolution and explains why we get so sidetracked. We spend our lives analyzing the caterpillar.
Right. And living out of the past, what
Yeah.
happened to, the way I used to be, et cetera. And there's so many individuals that have had the experience of being dissolved, so to speak,
Yeah.
of life crushing them and having to deal with enormous difficulties in life.
And one of the cool things about the caterpillar is it weaves the cocoon around itself. It doesn't wait for catastrophe to hit it. It chooses this part of its evolutionary path. And that's where we are in consciousness rather than focusing on our dysfunctions, our fears, our failures, kind of staying in the past. Um, Remembering that those things weren't involved in us at the start. They were just part of our journey, part of the temporary form. And we stay stuck in those because we reference our problems instead of referencing those imaginal discs within us. We try to fix the caterpillar, forgetting or maybe even unaware that we're designed to be a butterfly.
And well, the good news about that, once again, is that you're not who you think you are. You're much more.
Mhm.
You're not damaged. You're not less than, although it can feel that way. Your depression, your self deception, your fears, they cannot evolve because they were not involved in your birth. They were part of your experiences growing up, but they were not involved in the original
I think that's
blueprint.
so important, Hayden, that the depression, self-deception, self-doubt, those can't evolve because they are not part of the original
They're
blueprint.
they're not
I
part
love that.
of your destiny, but they are part of the experiences that you have chosen to help you evolve. Now, granted, and this is it's somewhat of an advanced understanding, but yeah, there can be textures or memories and knots, KNOTS, say particular individual problems that you bring in from other lifetimes. Those that really does happen.
And there's research now that says there's cellular memory that we actually remember what our ancestors, we have
Right,
we
of
share
course.
experiences from that as well.
But what can evolve then? It is the image of God, the divine that lies inside of you,
Mm.
the inexhaustible strength that lies inside of you, the infinite possibilities that lie inside of you, the boundless power of love and wisdom that lay inside of you. We are like inlets.
Mhm.
And every time I think of this image, I always think of Southport, North Carolina, and the inlet there that comes in from the ocean. We're like inlets receiving the power of the ocean, but we are not aware of it.
That's so beautiful. I love that picture.
And that's the only thing that can evolve, which is that image of the divine, of God, the spark of the divine that
Filling us
lies
up.
inside of
Yeah.
us. Everything else is really just a detour. And this takes us to principle number 4. The truth of who I am is contained in that involution. The hidden reality of the truth of my existence lies inside of me and evolves over time.
And it's such a contrast when I think about asking a woman recently when she was really distraught over things happening in her life, and I just paused. I said, "Do you believe that you are the spark of the divine?" And she said, "Absolutely." And then tears filled her eyes, and she said, "But I'm so flawed in so many ways." We have such an attachment to the flawedness rather than the expansiveness and the beauty within.
Well, we have an attachment to our experiences versus our existence, and that's why we stay trapped. But there's this hidden reality that lies inside of us, is that truth that evolves only through the passage of time. And we need to stop viewing time as a flat line or seeing it as an illusion, because it is a dynamic, powerful part of the evolutionary engine.
And it's
And,
purposeful.
and it's very
Yeah.
purposeful. You said something earlier, which is so true. It is not circular, it's not linear, it's a spiral that continues to move upwards. We have to increase our understanding of time, and that's time with a capital T. Time is really the architect of physical manifestation. If you are the seed and the outcome of your life process, as you said earlier, is the fruit of the seed, then the tree is the clock, so to speak. So it's so very important to understand that your evolution, the evolution of your soul, only takes place in the physical. When you die and you pass away and you leave the body, you do not evolve. You only evolve within the experiential physical. And this is why your life is so important. In fact, it is sacred.
So it's not like time is a circle. And we say things, history repeats itself, and unfortunately it does because we see time as a circle, a place where we just keep repeating our mistakes and doing the same things over and over again, hoping that we're going to get a different outcome.
That might be time with a small t.
Right.
Time with a capital T is this larger.
And that's when we waste so much time instead of really starting to ask, what is time for?
Right.
Not what time is it, but
What
what
time
is
is it?
time for?
Right.
Or even why does this keep happening to me? We'll come to that, but what is time for? What's the actual purpose of time?
Right. To begin to reorient your mind to a deeper and larger and more grander understanding of your existence by asking that question, what is it time for me to address?
In principle number 5, Hayden, each lifetime, each moment, each thought, each setback, each joy reveals more and more the meaning of these truths to me. It is a path my soul has chosen to advance my awakening to these truths. And I think this one, it's very poetic and beautiful. I love it, but it's a little more difficult for us to accept that, for example, no one has done anything to you, that you chose your circumstances as a path in life. And for some people, that would be extremely difficult to consider, but remember, you are not who you think you are. Again, you're a spiritual being in a physical body. Your soul could choose these circumstances to help you evolve, to help you grow, to help you come closer to the truth of who you are. You might think about it this way: you're the painter, but you're also the easel. You're the paint, you're the paintbrush, and then you're the painting. But remember, the mind is just one of these tools. A tool can't always understand the artist's intent. The mind sees this kind of incomplete mess on the canvas, a work in progress, so to speak, but the soul sees the masterpiece in progress. So it's not about finding the answers, looking out there to find the truth, because the answers lie in what was involved in you in your birth. It's about realizing the answers, not finding them, realizing the answers. And we can circle back, Hayden, to the beginning of our conversation. Remember that realization is synonymous with transformation. You use the word aha. Transformation is awakening. Transformation is awakening. It's the aha where the light bulb goes on, and as Sri Aurobindo would say, it is a descent of light into the very cells of your body.
I can give you an example of what I'm talking about, and very quickly. In the out of body experience that I had in 1987, I was allowed to see, and I talk about this from time to time. I was allowed to see that I had chosen the physical and sexual abuse that I would go through as a child, that I had chosen it as part of my growth and evolution and development in this lifetime. That if I was going to be able to help other people with their darkness, that it was important for me to have experienced that darkness. So, on the level of the ego, the pain is real and the injustice is felt. But on the level of the soul, it's an entirely different understanding. It's important to understand that the soul can choose difficult circumstances, but not be those difficult circumstances. That can play the game of depression, for example, without being depressed, can play the game of being rejected without being rejected. But the mind doesn't know that. The ego gets trapped in the experience, and that's okay. That's part of the evolutionary process.
And even the common experience, of course, that we all share, which is the experience of death, of losing people that we love and so forth. The individual person, unless they've been suffering a great deal, they wouldn't say, okay, I'm ready to go. But the soul is able to do that, and sometimes very, very gracefully, as we've seen.
Well, this is an unconscious approach to your evolution, but you have other choices and possibilities that await you. You can start getting conscious about it. You're not a victim of your own life. You're not a victim of the circumstances of your life. And although I know it feels that way. So the realization that I had in that experience, and that was just a very small part of the experience, it freed me from that. Why would I choose that? Is there another way to go about evolving? And of course, there is.
What is my soul seeking to realize through this intensity of this event, through this fire, through this difficulty? And when your heart is broken or you've been betrayed, your mind will absolutely reject the notion that you chose this, as a tool for growth. It feels like craziness to even suggest it, but I promise you that shifting from, and this has been in my own life as well, shifting from asking, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening? Or why isn't this working? To why did I draw this to me? What is the purpose of this in my life? What is in this for me to learn?
So let's go back to the spiritual principle. Each lifetime, each moment, each thought, each setback, each suffering, each joy reveals more and more the meaning of these truths to me. It is a path my soul has chosen to advance my awakening. Let's summarize now these 5 principles before we come to the 6th one. Let's bring everything together. Number 1, I'm a spiritual being in a physical world, but I have to develop my spirituality. Number 2, before I could evolve, something had to be involved in my birth. Number 3, nothing can evolve out of me that was not contained in me at the start. Number 4, the truth of who I am is contained in that involution. The hidden reality of the truth of my existence lies inside of me and evolves over time. And number 5 that we just looked at, each moment, each thought, each setback, each joy reveals more and more the meaning of this truth to me.
Now we have number 6, our last
Dun,
principle for
dun,
today. These truths contain the negation of my past and the fulfillment of my destiny and purpose as a human being. So, the negation of your past, it's not that it gets erased, but it's more of an emancipation from the past. It means the past has lost its authority over you and over your present and over your future. The power of the trauma or even of the triumph, we can't just keep
we can
living sitting on our
we can
laurels.
get just as fooled
Yeah.
in being successful as we can get fooled in failing.
So your past no longer defines you. Today's a new day.
And now you're left with the problem but it's a tremendous problem to have, because if you're not your past and you're not the sum of your experiences, then
What?
who are you? It's like peeling back layer upon layer, and suddenly there it is, or, there I am. And suddenly, you're presented with a whole new understanding of how to live.
It turns out your past isn't a mandate, and it's certainly not a prison that you're trapped in for the rest of your life. It was the fuel that your life, your system needed to ignite, to propel itself forward. It was the friction required to move your center of gravity away from the kind of noisy periphery of the world, from your stupid little ego that we all have, and toward your witness self and into the sanctuary of your true self. And you can feel the gravity of your soul. And while the ego's gravity, we can feel that too. It pulls us down in this familiar kind of mud of me and my story, the story that's too common to be told, right? But the soul's gravity pulls you upward and inward toward a destiny that you haven't even begun to imagine yet. And that is your new problem. You're no longer kind of a history to be resolved or to be healed from. You are a future waiting to be born. If these truths that we're discussing today, this idea of moving from the periphery to the center, of feeling the gravity of your own soul, resonate with you, we want to invite you to step into this experience more deeply with us. From July 31st through August 2nd, we're going to be at the Omega Institute for a workshop, Becoming You, the Path to Consciousness. It's one thing to hear about your evolution and to hear about the truth of who you are, to consider that you're the painter and the canvas while you're driving or while you're doing the dishes or some other task. It's quite another to step out of the noise of your daily life and sit in the presence of these truths with a community of other seekers. And at Omega, we won't just talk about evolution, we're going to practice becoming. So if you feel your soul's gravity is pulling you toward a new destiny, we'd love to see you there. And you can find all the details in the show notes, or you can visit our website, truthspringasheville.com, to register.
So, as we close out our time together today, we invite you to let these truths just settle in, not just in your mind, not just in your heart, but in the very cells of your body. We've covered a lot of ground in the six. We're going to cover the additional six in the next episode. But all of this is about leading towards a shift in how we live, of how we perceive ourselves in the world. And it begins with the recognition that you're a spiritual being in a physical world, but your spirituality has to be developed. And that is a fact.
Remember, you cannot grow what wasn't already planted. Before you could evolve, something divine had to be involved in your birth. Nothing can come out of you that wasn't already hidden within you at the start. Your potential isn't something you have to go out and get. It's a truth that's been waiting inside you since your first breath. It's unfolding precisely as it should through the mechanism of time. Every moment you've lived, every sharp setback, every joy, every thought that's crossed your mind hasn't just been a distraction, it's part of your path. And each one of those experiences was a reveal. It's a slow peeling back of the veil to show you who you truly are and to aid you in becoming you. And when you start working with this, the past loses its grip. It's truly negated. It becomes just a little bump in the road, a little nuisance, not because it didn't happen, but because it no longer has the power to tell you who you are.
Spoke about the traditional approaches to human development in the previous episode, and this is the new approach that is being born in our world today, which is the development of the spiritual truth of who and what we are. It's no longer about following a creed or a dogma or the crowd. It really is about the development of the individual, about you awakening to the truth of your own existence, and then having the courage to express that truth in the world. So as you go about your day, don't just look at the clock, look at your life. Stop asking, well, what time is it? And really ask the question, what is it time for me to be? What is it time for me to do? Because the future isn't something that happens to you, it's something that is born through you and your consciousness.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, and we hope to see you again next week.